school, I always knew that communication was something I was going to do, full time. Even though the way I even studied mass communication was so funny. My first course of choice was international law. So I should have been Larry Simmons' colleague. Well, guess what? I got to the exam hall late. We had a flat tire on the way from Lagos. Babcock is in Ogun State. So myself and my family friend, a driver took us and we had a flat tire. And by the time we got to university, international law, they had finished their exam. So I was just looking up. I said, God, maybe this is a sign that you don't want me to study law. So what next? What do you want me to do? And my second choice of course of choice rather, was mass communication. And guess what? At that time, I didn't know anything about communication. I just knew there were broadcasters that used to read news, but I did not know anything about communication. And the reason why communication was my second choice was because I didn't like calculation. So mass communication was the course, that didn't require mathematics for you to get entry into university. So long story cut short, I passed my examination. And during the interview, I felt very unserious because, people were coming. I saw them in clusters talking about, possible questions. And I didn't know anything about mass communication. So I was just eavesdropping from different clusters of communication. Oh, there's something called journalism. Oh, there's something called advertising. And that's how I just breezed my way through the interview process, because after you pass the exam, you still do interview before you get the admission. So I was just going to different clusters. I would see people discussing. I was just eavesdropping that, oh, so this is broadcasting. So that's what communication is about. And that's how I started communication. And several years down the line, I'm still here. I'm still doing it. And I'm happy that, the incidents that happened that led me to studying mass communication happened. Okay. I think they're still trying to pull the slides. So the content pillars that we'll be focusing on, we talked about understanding publicity basics last week. We talked about publicity strategies for your business. We talked about taking advantage of new media. We talked about creating a strong social media presence. I'll do a brief summary, but for today's class, we're going to be talking about managing negative publicity, and I'll also share some real studies. Some I've worked on, some, the things I pulled off online that I followed the stories. Okay. So let's just move straight to... Before we move straight to it, let me just start by talking about what publicity is for the sake of those who were not in last week's class. So publicity is earned media. And I explained last week that earned media is the media that you do not pay for. So think of it as when you get a coverage, maybe on social media platforms, maybe there's a trending story and you did not pay to be featured on that blog. And you see someone like a Bella Ninja, posting it, or someone like Y Ninja, or a popular blogger like maybe a Tunde Ednot, or those popular influencers. So those are called like publicity. The difference between publicity and the different forms of advertising, and I talked about how to different kinds of marketing campaigns, that we run, or that can be run by different brands. For marketing, you have to pay for the slots. I talked about out of home, which are the billboards you see outside. For those slots, you cannot get there with earned media. You must pay for it because there are different types of fees that have to go to Lagos State advertising. There's a body for advertising and all those things. So anything you see out of home on billboard, digital, rest assured that, it's a marketing effort and it's paid for. Okay? I talked about publicity strategies for your business. I talked about you having a unique value proposition. I talked about leveraging on word of mouth, because some people will think until you have a certain amount of money, you cannot actually market your product, your business, or your services. You can start from where you are and then you scale up. I talked about also partnering, using Jones' organization as a case study. When you have partnership with like-minded people, and then you market, they market for you, you market for them. Their target audience has seen your content, and you likewise too as well. Talked about creating compelling messages to attract your target audience. I also talked about from traditional to digital, different types of platforms that we have. We have traditional media, and we also have digital media. I talked about traditional media being TV, radio, flyers. I also talked about the unconventional way we used to do, pass out information in the days of old, using the town criers that will come to the village square. So those are like traditional media. So the point here is, as an individual, as a business owner, understand what your unique value proposition is, understand the different platforms, and know what works for you. Okay? So I'm moving to slide 9, which is where I stopped last week, which is creating engaging content. Talked about the do's and don'ts, do not oversell, and like our influencers or our social media coaches will tell us, show up every day, you must always post, post 3 times in a day, or, post every day of the week. And I explained to us that in most cases, you need to understand your business, your value proposition. You do not have to post. If you're posting every day and then it's not converting, or if you're posting every day and then your content is not relatable, then you're just making noise. That's what we call it in communication. When there is no feedback, communication is usually a two-way thing. If there's no feedback, you're just making noise online. And this you will know when you check your social media statistics to see the level of engagement, the people comment, the people repost, the people retweet, what time of the day do people actually like to, consume your content. So moving very quickly, if you have questions, please just take notes of the questions, and when we get to the end of the class, I'll take it. So we're going to be starting from slide 10, which talks about creating a strong social media presence. How many of us have social media handles here? I don't want to assume that everybody has. Okay, so like 80% of us we have. So when you want to build a consistent and professional profile, the first thing is your picture. Your picture is what tells, when people look at your picture, it tells them, in a sense, who you are, what you're about. Do you get what I mean? So that's why we usually encourage people to have like your corporate profile pictures. It could be if some people use their corporate pictures, some people would rather use their logo, depending on the services that you are preferring. But in this context, I'm going to be talking about profile picture. So ensure you have a clear profile picture. If you do not have enough money at the moment to do like a proper photo shoot, you can use a good phone, get a clear background, take a picture, ensure that it's well lit, your face is showing, your physical features are showing, from here upwards. Okay? Ensure that your bio is concise. So people go to your bio should tell them about you, your products, your services. For example, let me use, which brand will I use as an example? Maybe let me use MTN. MTN, they say everywhere you go, right? That they are present in the 36 states. So if you go to your bio should pretty much tell you all there is to know in very short and simple, sentences. And then there could also be a contact there. So if people want to reach you, how do they reach you? Is it via email? Is it a phone number? Do you have a website? That should also be in your bio. The next thing is to develop a simple content strategy. So what this means is on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, I always advise people to do it on a monthly basis. So on a monthly basis, you think of, okay, so what do I want to talk about? Maybe this week we want to, or let's say this month, we want to introduce a new product or service. Okay, so you create more like a campaign strategy that pretty much speaks to what you would do before the product is launched, which we call pre. When the product is launched, which is the second stage, then post, when the product is launched, we call it post-event. So the pre, you then determine, okay, do we run a pre-event or pre-campaign, marketing for 3 months? Do we run it for 1 month? Do we run it for 6 months? Depending on what it is that you're trying to introduce. Most people call this teasers. You would see, I remember when there was a brand, called Five Alive Pulpy. They wanted to reintroduce themselves. They had gone into, I don't want to say extinction, but they were not really producing at the time. So when they wanted to do a market comeback, we had teasers like, where's the pulp? People were wondering, what do you mean by where's the pulp? You just see something orange across Lagos on social media, where is the pulp? And people were wondering, what do they mean by where is the pulp? There's another brand, McVitie's. You go all about the place, you see them, maybe you see a big creative in a major place in Lagos State, and you'll be wondering, what does this box mean? So those are like teasers. If you bring it to social media too as well, so teasers could you mean talking about what kind of services you want to prefer, what the product is about, without actually mentioning the name of the product. So people are wondering, what is this thing? You just say, maybe if it's a healthy product, you just say, something like this product would help you. Maybe you're trying to lose weight, think no further. A product is coming to help you lose weight. Or if it's people that are struggling to, maintain a healthy lifestyle, just something around creating sensitization on what you can do. So the copies would differ, or would vary rather. So that's, that one. Then when you understand what it is that you're trying to push out, that then influences the kind of content that you would deploy. So on a weekly basis, I've broken it down, like depending on what it is that you're doing. If you want to run it maybe for 1 month or 3 months, depending, you then know the kind of content that you should be pushing out. So on week 1, what kind of things are we saying? On what platform? Are we doing YouTube? Are we doing Instagram? Are we doing Facebook? I remember I said last week that most times, many of us, we often use the same caption across all social media platforms. In most cases, that doesn't really do enough justice to you, because the audience on LinkedIn is different from the audience on Instagram. The audience on TikTok is different from the audience on X. So if you're just doing copy and paste, X people, like I said last week, they are very, just make it short. Let them understand. TikTok, is it fun? Is it, something they can vibe to? Just something short that when they see the video, because that's typically what you would find on TikTok, like videos. When they see the caption, it pretty much tells them what it is that you're talking about. Okay, so this then helps you create weekly post schedule. I've talked about content pillars. So content pillars mean, what exactly are you trying to communicate? Are you trying to educate people? Are you trying to inspire them? Are you trying to motivate them? This helps for you to create your content pillar. Another thing for content pillar that people really need to leverage on, and I encourage people to leverage on, is testimonials. Always ensure when you provide a product or service to a client, an organization, an individual, always get a feedback from them. Oh, how was my service? Is there anything you like? Is there anything you want us to improve on? And in most cases, the feedback would be positive, right? So those feedback, you could take it a step further, that please, can you help me do a video to just endorse? That's marketing. Are you paying for it? No. The person has bought your product, the person has bought your service, and you can take it a step further, that please, when you wear my product or when you use my services, can you please post online and tag my business? Some of them might say no, but at least you've tried. Do you understand what I mean? So these are, how to create content pillars, different strategies to use. Another thing to do is, using the right hashtags. You can check on Google to check, the kind of hashtags to use for your business and for that particular post. You can also check on ChatGPT too as well, and different AI platforms. They help, they recommend. Another thing is strong call to action. Do not leave a communication open-ended. So for example, let's say you are posting a video about a food that maybe you sold or you want to sell. Maybe you do like a bouquet services. Okay, so the call to action could then be, if you want to reach out to us, call so and so number, or for more information, see link in the bio, or send us a DM. Like, do not leave your caption open-ended without having a call to action, because people are often moved by what it is that they see, and this you can help them if you're able to communicate effectively. Okay, increase engagement and interactions. One of the ways you can do this is, to answer, you can use your the poll feature on Instagram. I believe we also have it on Facebook too as well, for people to ask you questions, especially if you're trying to introduce a new product or a new service. Do not assume that what it is that you are trying to introduce, people actually do need it. It's always good for you to sample your current target audience, their feedback, what do they think about it? Because people often are endeared towards your brand or your product if they feel like they've followed you through on the journey. I'm sure you'd have seen some people, maybe they're trying to create a new maybe logo. I know Abraham has done that thing before, like, creating the logo and asking people for people's opinion, option A, option B. It's not like you don't know what you want, but carrying people on that journey, they pretty much feel like, oh, this person thought about me, I'm a part of it. So whatever thing it is that you're trying to do, they'll be looking forward to it because they've already contributed in one way or the other. So these are ways to create engagement online. I talked about share client testimonials. If they're able to give you your videos, share it online. If there are screenshots of how your product or services has impacted them positively through your DM or your WhatsApp chats, these are ways to authenticate your brand. When people see feedback from real life people, they know that they are doing business with someone who is of reputable, an organization who is reputable. So the next slide is talking about measuring success. So how do you measure success? Because at the end of the day, you do not want to communicate or deploy different strategies and you're not sure of the efficacy of what it is that you've done or what it is that you are doing. So the first one is, what are your engagement rates? What are the likes, the comment, the shares? You can check this on Instagram, you can see it. On LinkedIn, you can see it. On Twitter as well, too, you can see it. You also need to check what is the reach and impression. Reach and impression pretty much is, the unique views of impressions. Unique views plus impressions equals to total views. They might sound technical to you, but I'm happy to explain if you need me to. You also follow the growth rate of your audience. How many, when you started the year, how many followers did you have? When you started a campaign, how many followers did you have? When you started running a sponsored ad, how many followers did you have? And then after the sponsored ad or after the campaign, how have you grown? It's good for you to follow your growth rate. There's also something called click-through rate. So what this means is the percentage of users clicking your post or your link. Also, there's something called conversion rate, which is the percentage of people who actually did take action. So it could be learn more, follow us now, sign up. Maybe it's a thought leadership article that you are redirecting them to your website or your blog. So how many people actually downloaded it? How many people actually clicked? How many people actually went there? So you can check these two as well. There's also something called share of voice. So what this means is, how well is your brand visible among competitors? Do you actually track what it is that your competitors are doing? I'm talking about healthy competitors. What are they doing? What are they doing right? What are things that you can do as well? So this is share of voice. There's also something called customer sentiment. What this means is the perception of the public. How do you know? I mentioned last week that it's always good for you to have a form. Google has made most of all these materials easy, accessible for us. You don't have to pay for it. So there's something called a feedback form. So if you go on Google and just Google feedback form, it will give you a template. You can adopt it to suit your business or your service. So at the end of, it could be maybe on a monthly basis, it could be annually, it could be quarterly. Just send it randomly to your customers. I would like to, if our product or service has been of help to you, could you please help us just take 1 minute to fill this feedback form? So you're sure that what you're actually doing, you are doing it well, and do not just assume. And sometimes too, it's also good for you to have feedback. Maybe if business has not been moving well and you're wondering what's going on, in your head, I've spent so much on marketing, I've run sponsored ads, but it's not just converting. Do you understand what I mean? So one of the ways to tackle that is to do a feedback to your current customers. You could also do a Google form to potential customers too as well, who have never patronized you, who have never patronized your services. You could share this among your friends, your colleagues, to please help share across their social media platform, and then you know what actually it is that people need. Then finally, we have content performance. So what this means is how you track your success. It could be your videos, it could be your reels, Instagram gives you these insights. Okay, so this is also talking about analytics tools. there's something called, before I talk about Google Analytics, does anybody here know what we call Google My Business? Does anybody know Google My Business here? Just one person. Okay, two. Wow, that's interesting. So, okay, three. So, like I said, Google is a free tool that almost everybody should use. Some people would say, "Oh, I don't have money to build a website." You know, you can build a free website on Google. And I talked about Google My Business because Google My Business is something that Google designed to help business owners more visible on the platform. So there, you can upload your pictures, you can upload what your services are, videos. There's also a portion where customers are able to give reviews. Do you understand? So if people Google Google your product or service, if you've been able to imbibe SEO, which is we call search engine optimization, you pop up, they read your reviews, and they'll think, oh, do I do business with this person? Do I not do business with this person? So it's very important. If you're a business owner, please sign up for Google My Business. Okay? So Google Analytics. So this helps you track your website visits from social media, measure your return of investment and conversion rates too as well. I've talked about Meta Insights. I've talked about X, which is Twitter, the Insights. I've talked about LinkedIn Analytics. YouTube too as well also has YouTube Studio, where you can pretty much check the statistics of how people consume your videos. There's also a platform that most content creators or people who have businesses online use to schedule content. If you run a very busy lifestyle and you do not have the luxury of time every day to post, maybe I'm supposed to post at 3 o'clock or post at 1 o'clock. There's something called Hootsuite, there's something called Buffer, there's something called Sprout, even Instagram too as well. Without you using these platforms, LinkedIn has it, Instagram has their own scheduling platform, or is embedded into the post such that you can schedule it. If you want to schedule for the whole month, you can do that. Another thing that I always encourage people to use is Canva. With Canva, you can do so many things. You can create content. You can, track your performance. Same thing with BITL2, which we use to create short links and QR codes if you're maybe running a campaign or, you just want a call to action. So now, very quickly, we're going to be talking about managing negative PR. Before I go into this case study, let me just give you a real-life experience that I had. This was my very first time at crisis management. Then I was a rookie PR professional. This was in 2014. I was probably 4 years or 5 years in PR. So I didn't really have much hands-on experience about crisis communication. I'll just hear about it. I'll see my bosses, and I remember at the time we were also managing Lagos State government when Ambode was trying to run. So I would see the different ways that my bosses would go about negative PR, but personally, I had not experienced it, but I would just be watching them from afar off. Like I said, I was a rookie PR professional. So there was this case between Coca-Cola and CPC. CPC is called Consumer Protection Council. So what it is, they regulate, consumer complaints and all that. You're able to file if there's any situation as regards to a product or a service. So Coca-Cola was sued by CPC for selling a short-filled Sprite bottle in Abuja. And for you to know that the situation was even very interesting, Coke now said, can we have this specimen? The specimen is the Sprite bottle, right? Can we have it so we can do a factory check to see the serial number, there's a serial number on the bottle, so that way we know what production plant it came from and all of that. And they were refusing to release the specimen. So we just knew that this case was, was from wherever. So they sued us. Coca-Cola were my clients at the time. And prior to then, I had worked in Abuja. So this time I was in Lagos. I was back in Lagos. I'd done my NYC in Abuja with Radio Nigeria. And then at the time, I think I worked with so after Radio Nigeria, I worked with another radio station too as well. And I used to cover the judiciary. So what that means is I used to go to the court a lot. Remember Dimeji Bankole's case when they were always dragging him to court? I used to see everything live, our reports, So in a sense, me not studying international law, in university, for those of us that were early when I told you, my story, in a sense, I had hands-on, experiences because I was covering the course. So it was so much fun for me. I met amazing people like Festus Kiamu and those kind of people who used to really encourage me then that, this called my Yoruba name, Oluwadam Lola. I think you should go back to school for masters, international law, the way you report these cases. And I would just smile because I'm like, I know why I was passionate about it because, that was like my typical first choice of study. So I'm giving you this background so you understand how I was able to deal with the crisis case that, was obviously in court. So I had good relationship with my colleagues, the media guys, in Abuja. Abuja is obviously the Federal Capital Territory. So every media, or let me say in the media, we have something we call beats. So beats are like different sectors. So there's something called news beats. There's something called entertainment beats. There's something called the judiciary beats. So for this, the context of which we're talking about is the judiciary bit. I belong to the National Judiciary Council of Nigeria, at the time. So when I saw this particular case in the newspaper that day, I remember going to my boss. I was very small. I went to my boss's office. I was like, sir, I know who wrote this story. He was just looking at me like, what was this one saying? I said, I know who wrote this story. That can I engage this person? Is the president of National Judiciary Correspondents Association of Nigeria. Is my egbon. My boss was just looking at me like, this one that is just a rookie, really. But I wouldn't blame him anyways. But me, the kind of person I am, I still went ahead. I called that my senior, my egbon. I called him. I was like, Oga Tobi, what happened now? What's this story about? Why are you suing my client? They were like, oh, is your client, this and this is what happened. Then it was just this day. He was in this day newspaper at the time. So he now said to me that if before the press goes to bed, press going to bed is, they filed all their reports for the day and then they've sent it for press. So the next morning, you just begin to see the papers, the news stories everywhere. That if I think when I called him was like maybe 11, 12. So it was like within the next 3 hours, if you're not able to send your counter reports, trust me, it's going to be across all the pages of the newspaper. So I told my boss that, this is what Toby said though, that, let's just try to do something, to ensure that this doesn't happen and all. But because my boss didn't listen to me, he now called all the people he knew in the media. And these people now referred him back to that Egbon Toby. Egbon Toby now said, but Dami has spoken to you. Why didn't you do something about it since? I'm very sorry, sir. Tomorrow morning you wake up to the news blitz. And that's what happened. So when I got to work the next morning, my boss just said, John, you are going to Abuja. That was the only brief I got. I was like, going to Abuja. He said, Shebi, you know them. Go and sort it out. That's how I found myself in this crisis situation. That was the only brief. I promise you, that was the only brief. But like I said earlier, I love challenges. In fact, if it's not a challenging situation, I might not even do it. I love it so much. It gives me time to be creative, to stretch myself. So when I went to Abuja, and because I knew the kind of boss that I had, it's an amazing person. It's one person that actually taught me most of the things that I know today in terms of grit, wit, and professionalism and what PR is about. It's pretty much the person that gave me my first experience. Knowing the kind of person he is, I didn't want to look stupid. So what I did was when I got to Abuja, I called Egbon Tobi that, I'm in Abuja, this is what happened, what the CPC is saying, this is our own side of the story. We have a court case tomorrow. What are we going to do about it? And we sat down together and we both developed a PR strategy on what to do, how to do it. So the first thing is, number one, ensure that you get to the court early. So when I got to the court early, so that gives me a sense of understanding my environment. And another thing is, Coca-Cola, of course, they're multinational. So the MD had said he didn't want his pictures to be in the faces of the newspaper. And in Federal High Court of Nigeria in Abuja, typically journalists are not allowed to bring in their cameras. You're not supposed to film. You could only film if before the court sits in. But once the court starts to sit, you're not supposed to film. And before then, there was even a communication that no journalist should even bring in their cameras into the courtroom. So I got early to the court. I spoke to the securities, and I said, please, this and this and this. Please ensure you search everybody's bags. Please ensure nobody comes. So of course he cooperated, and with the help of my egbon, like I said, relationships are very, very critical in the success of anybody, any business. But guess what? One or two people were very smart. They brought in their cameras into the courtroom, and my client was looking at me like, what's going on? So I stood up. I was just running like, I was very small. I was just running. I was just trying to do like FBI. Like, why you filming? Why you this? They were just like, anyways, long story cut short, they were not able to film. They were not able to use, well, one person did. But in a scale of, say, we had like maybe 13 reporters. It was just one person that, was reporting it negatively. Every other person following the story knew what was happening. At the end of every court proceeding, and I was always going alone. It wasn't like I had one senior colleague that was going with me every time we had the court case. So after the court case, I would sit down, I would write my report, I would send to my boss, I would tell him, okay, so for the next court sitting, this is the strategy I want us to deploy, and for some reason, it was always, cool with the suggestions and, all the recommendations I made. At the end of the day, we had, I think it was about 3 or 4 court proceedings. At the end of the day, of course, I was also interacting with the journalists too as well to ensure that I was being objective. I was not in any way trying to spin the story around, because that is not communication. That's manipulation. Telling them what the fact is. This is my own position. I write my press release. I send it to them. Whatever they do with it, at that point in time, it's off my table. But thankfully, we started having from negative slant, it turned to neutral. From neutral, it now became positive. And one day, I remember my client then calling me saying, oh, John, CPC has called us for an out-of-court settlement, and it was settled amicably. And at the end of the day, that was how that story just ended, So everybody was happy that, oh, John, what did you do? How did you do it? I said, I don't even know what I was doing. I just know I was just coming up with different, it wasn't like maybe there was a template that I used. It was me just being proactive, understanding the situation, and, moving steps ahead. So I thought to give that example so we understand why I said I love crisis communication. So let's just talk about, because we have limited time, so let's just talk about managing negative publicity using some case studies. Sterling Bank is on slide 14. So Sterling Bank, I don't know if we remember this campaign. There was an ad controversy in Sterling Bank. It was an Easter banana. So Sterling Bank ran an Easter campaign comparing the resurrection of Christ to a risen banana. Many Christians found that very offensive, and it was just really messy online. So what happened and what was the strategy? The bank faced severe backlash on social media. People were dragging them. The advertising council, I told you earlier that we have a regulating council called ARCON. ARCON is Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria. They also investigated the matter too as well. What did Sterling Bank do? They issued an apology, telling people that, or customers rather, that it wasn't intentional, and they pulled it down, and they were, so for when you have a crisis, you must always have a crisis communication strategy prior to the crisis. So who it is that they should speak to, who should be responding on behalf of the brand. Not everybody just talking. So the first thing to do is to deploy a statement. What happened? What are we doing? I remember, I don't know if you know this hospital, Verdict Life Care. There was a time that they sued them to court because one of their doctors did not have his license. And somehow, somebody recommended, my consulting company to them, and they reached out to us. So I asked because it's owned by Indians, so I had a meeting with them to really understand what it is that is happening. So that way, we know how to communicate, the kind of statement to issue. Did you have the license or did you not have the license? Did you not have the license? Okay. So I issued a statement saying that, it has come to our notice that the Lagos State government has sealed this hospital because of this, that. The said doctor did not have the license, but Actually, he had started applying for the license, but somehow, the process was slow. So that's why he didn't have the license. Not like he didn't want to have it. So this is what we are doing to ensure that, such a thing does not reoccur again. So they sealed the hospital. After doing that statement, I then engaged the media too as well to tell them next steps of what the organization was going to do, getting the license back. So when the doctor now got the license back, now issued another statement again to say now the doctor has gotten his license back. We've engaged with the Lagos State government and the Ministry of Health, all of that. And eventually the hospital was reopened. So my point is, when crisis situations happen, do not wait for crisis situations to happen before you know that you need to have a crisis management tactic. Who is speaking, what are we saying, what do we need to do? In most cases, some people have their in-house communications department that would always have this strategy document. In other cases, you have to employ the services of consultants, so you're speaking right, you're acting right, you're speaking to the right people, and it's not a counter production, mechanism. So at the end of the day, back to Sterling Bank. At the end of the day, the outcome was, of course, there was reputational damage control. I'm sure when they checked their sentiments online, it would have been negative. But the fact that they were able to proffer a sincere apology, that helped them. And over time, they ensured that such a thing did not reoccur again, and not associate. So what people say is, if, as a professional, do not associate your religion with your profession. So if you notice, some organizations, they try as much as possible, like during Easter, they're not really mentioning God. We're just talking about the fact that it is Easter. Happy Easter, so that you are not saying something and is ticking off the other religion the wrong way, and vice versa. I have a couple more of case studies, but because our time is far gone, let me just conclude by saying that key takeaways for us. This will be the second to the last slide. So publicity, not advertising. Publicity builds credibility. I'd always encourage people, ensure that you build, before you start running ads or whatever, build a personal brand so that you build authenticity. People know what you are, what you do. So by the time you start running ads, they can, pretty much put both side by side. Tell your story well. I always tell people this. I tell clients this. Do not let somebody tell your story for you. Whatever thing it is that you are doing, be the one to articulate it effectively and properly. I talked about testimonials. I talked about, having people share their reviews on your Google My Business. These are tools that you do not necessarily need to pay for. Leverage new media. New media, we talked about the different types of channels, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Be consistent. Consistency is very key. Rome was not built in a day. Coca-Cola, like I said last week, even though they are over 120 years, they are very, very consistent in their messaging, in their marketing. They are always in the faces of the people. Handle criticism with grace. Criticism is feedback, whichever way you want to spin it. And then finally, visibility is not vanity. It's stewardship. Like the Bible will say, whatever thing it is that God has placed in your hand to do it with all your mind, do it with all your strength. And, the Bible says, shine your light so bright for all men to see God's good work and glorify the Father which is in heaven. So you are a steward of God. God has given you this gifts. God has given you this wisdom, this knowledge. So why are you hiding it under the bushel? Why not shining it for people to see that, in whichever field that you are that light in that field. If you're in fashion, if you're in, food, if you are in tech, wherever you are, ensure that you keep shining the light of God so bright. Thank you all so much. My time is up. But if there's any question, maybe I'll just take one question before I take my bow. Okay, one question.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to speak concerning response to criticism. You said we should tackle criticism professionally. So I've also had people say, especially when it comes to personal branding, I've also had people say that you don't need to respond to the public, like just leave the shalaye, that with time things die down. So is there at any point where that works? And do you get my point now? Thank you.
So it depends on what it is. If it's bad press, depending on the scope, if it's a scandal, if depending on it, so there are just different ways to spin it. Sometimes I encourage my clients to be silent, depending on the scope of what it is that you're doing. There are some cases that you must respond, which is why I said you need to have a communications consultant to advise you on what to do part-time. Because you might not even know what you're supposed to be quiet about. You might not know what you're supposed to be responding about and how you're supposed to respond, the manner, the tone, because there's a tone to communication, right? You don't want to be defensive. There are times you need to be defensive. There are times you need to just say it as it is. So my advice would be, just employ the services of a consultant to just advise you on, the scope of what the crisis is or the situation. Should you respond or should you not respond? Right. Thank you very much.